Good morning, watchers. Welcome to Brother Sal's Sunday gathering at the storehouse. So pleased to have you here once again, and I'm very happy to be here myself. And I want to welcome so many new listeners that we're starting to accumulate over at BroSal and Philadelphia Church. It's really a pleasure to welcome you. I hope that you enjoy our broadcast. And I'd like you to understand something about what authority that we claim with these broadcasts, and is that people who've been watching this come to pass for 35 years as a ministry operating to do just that. Watch what happens in the Middle East to see if Daniel's prophecy was really coming to pass, and this is really the end times. And I'm very fortunate that my son Tony is following it with me all these years and has formed some of his own opinions, which have take even greater analysis of what's going on. And as I get older and older, it's a little getting tougher and tougher for me. And I'm so happy that Tony is with me. He's here with me again today. Welcome, Tony.
Good morning, Dad. Coming to you from Budapest, Hungary this week, where I'm going to be for some time, next 3 months, in the land of Viktor Orban, the good Christian prime minister of Hungary, who believes in putting up a razor wire fence and turning away refugees. And you know, we're always talking about the disinformation and the disparagement between the number of refugees. I keep reading 11 million displaced Syrians, 11 million, which is half the population of Syria, apparently. And, you know, we know there's 1.5 million or whatever in Jordan. I mean, where's the other 9 million that people like Viktor Orban have been talking about, this army that's coming to Europe to change the face of Europe? In one of these articles today, it talked about tens of thousands of immigrants. So I'm still looking for the millions. I'm still looking for, you know, how long's it been now? Which countries are being overrun? I mean, wouldn't there be millions now in Sweden? Wouldn't there be millions of these 11 million arriving in Germany and these other countries? Why is it still tens of thousands? Where are the millions? Are they just, you know, I imagine they're in their country hoping to get back to their homes. They're in Turkey. They're staying close to home because, as we've said all along, this refugee crisis is just a setup for the false flags that will come. And today, what I've been looking at this week, Dad, really does, for me, put a lot of details to that. So let's jump right into the headlines. But it's from October 31st by Josh Rogan, who is a Bloomberg View columnist and writes about national security and foreign affairs. He's previously worked for the Daily Beast, Newsweek, Foreign Policy Magazine, The Washington Post, Congressional Quarterly, and Asahi Shimbun. So that should tell you where our, you know, this is a mouthpiece giving you official propaganda. So the title of this one, No One But U.S. Believes Russia Will Abandon Assad. And what I think is so interesting, Dad, is they're really starting to play the cards now, or lay them out on the table the way, I mean, if you've been listening to me for the last few weeks or months, you know, all the way from the beginning of ISIS, I said this is a setup, and obviously we can't stop them. They have to grow big enough to be a world threat. They have to threaten Israel. They have to be so bad that the whole world doesn't know what to do, but, you know, start this war, which, to put it in the context of the scriptures, we've got ISIS being led by a self-proclaimed caliph of the Muslims who comes from the line of the Hashemites from Muhammad, and so has that claim to be the ruler of Islam. Although, as I've learned from Sheikh Imran Hussein, that is a false claim. He goes back in their Islamic scripture, in the Quran and in the hadiths of the Prophet, and he points out that nowhere did the prophet say that it would only be his bloodline that would lead. And of course, it wasn't that way to begin with. The people that followed him, the leaders that led the entire ummah, or the entire population of Islam, were not his relatives, and nobody objected. It wasn't until I don't know how long later, a few generations, in which there became this schism, that now they said, no, you have to be a descendant of Muhammad, and then that started this divide within their own religion. So what you have in the world today is this self-proclaimed caliph from the line of Muhammad, leading this, extremely radical Sunni delegation of terrorists, which, all the alternative media seems to understand that they're funded through Saudi Arabia and the United States. We know that all these Toyota trucks were sent over to al-Nusra, and al-Nusra gave them to ISIS, and it's just all so convenient that these people started as a flag on a piece of propaganda like the Washington Post or whatever it was, and now I'm going to read it today. It's everything I've been claiming. They're just so big, they haven't lost an inch, one of these articles have said, with all the power of the U.S. and allies and Russia, both trying to put a dent in ISIS, and they haven't lost an inch. So you take it the way you want. If you think the Washington Post and the New York Times is giving you the dope on this, then you've just got to believe that somehow this band of rebels, who doesn't even have an airplane, they don't have any fighter jets, but somehow they have the capability to keep the U.S. and its allies, Israel, Jordan, Russia. Nobody can put a dent in them. In fact, you can't even keep them from spreading. So, but now what I've been trying to point out, and I think this week really goes for me to prove it, Dad, is that Russia's being drawn in to fund the weapons on the other side so that eventually we can get to a genocidal World War III that will destroy that region and as many Arabs as they can, so that when Israel takes over that land, there won't be so many Arabs to round up and put under their regime. In fact, they'll be all happy to have Israel, kind of like a reverse of what happened 1,000 years ago when the Jews have been living in that land under Muslim governments and living peacefully next to their Muslim neighbors. They just didn't have a state. They don't have the rule, but they have the ability to live their own way in these Muslim territories. So the future, according to Israel, I believe, the agenda that's being played out, the Zionist agenda, is that after this great Third World War, what we're going to have is Israel ruling the land and allowing whatever Muslims are left to live in their land. So a complete reversal of what we have today. That appears to be the general context of what's coming, but how are we getting there? And, we talked about the Albert Pike predictions or alleged predictions last week, and I think I'm going somewhere else this week. Brother Dave had written about wanting to explore that, and I really do, but I don't have all my facts today, so I promise that next week I'm gonna talk a little. I'm gonna do some study this week and try and talk next week about the specifics of the Albert Pike predictions and how we might fit that into our context and our watch. But for now, what I'd like to point out is that in fact there is this prediction, whether fictional or not, that World War III will be the atheists against the Christians. And we know from our scripture and from the Quranic scripture, it's destined to happen over there in what we call Armageddon, what the Muslims call the Malhama, and it's all right there around Damascus. This is where it all takes place. So I've been saying for several years now, interesting how the buildup of arms keeps happening over there, where, coincidentally enough, the two monotheistic faiths that are waiting for the Messiah to return and waiting for a false Messiah, and waiting for the great war that's going to be bigger than anything that's ever happened and destroy much of the population, they coincidentally have it over there by Damascus, where we coincidentally now have Russia building up arms and NATO talking about how they're going to have to counter that by building up arms. So this is where I want to go today as a context and use these mouthpiece articles that I've gotten this week to fill in the blanks. So this first one, no one but U.S. believes Russia will abandon Assad. So we're making the U.S., is making this play that, yeah, okay, Russia's going to know better than to go for a big war, and they're going to eventually give up Assad, but all the rest of the people around them, all of our allies, are saying, no, they're not. So we got this sort of tension, which to me all fits this context, because what we need is everybody to keep building up arms over there for the war that's coming. So this article starts, the Obama administration began a new diplomatic process Friday to solve the Syria crisis, a gambit that depends on Russia to eventually push Syrian President Bashar al-Assad to step down. But not even America's allies think Russia will reverse its support for the dictator. Representatives of all the countries supporting forces in Syria's civil war met for 9 hours in Vienna, after which top U.S. officials said that the new talks had made some progress in identifying shared goals such as maintaining Syria's territorial integrity and ending the violence. Diplomats from the U.S., Russia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and several other countries agreed to meet again within 2 weeks. There was no agreement on the key issue, whether Assad would be compelled to leave power as part of a transition to a new Syrian government. Now, interesting, because of course, if you go back a few weeks and months, there is no deal with Assad, right? Assad has to step down. We read several weeks ago, Turkey's Erdogan said, that it's just unforeseeable that there could be any peace until he's out of there. So now all of a sudden we're talking peace. The U.S. is pointing out that we're talking peace, and the other allies are saying, I don't know, I don't think Russia's going to go for it. The interesting part in these first two paragraphs that struck me, the shared goals, identifying shared goals such as maintaining Syria's territorial integrity. Now, I find that very interesting because remember, that means the Kurds are being told, you're not going to get part of Syria. In my view, that's what that's saying. Maintaining Syria's territorial integrity, meaning they're not going to divide it up in the way that Cheney had talked about dividing up Iraq into Kurdish, Sunni, Shia states. This is what they're all agreeing on. Well, we can't divide up Syria. We got to maintain its territorial integrity. Well, if you know the scriptural point of view, of course, the Hashemite king of today has vowed to have their old Hashemite kingdom back and the Caliphate that they were promised 100 years ago. You got to remember to keep that into our context, because from their point of view, the Hashemites in Jordan, this is what their play is. This is what they're after. So Syria's territorial integrity, in my view, means he's not given up any of Syria. That's what he wants out of this, is his old kingdom and the Caliphate that has to include all of Syria. So they're not going to talk about dividing Syria up into Shia and Sunni Syria. They want to maintain its territorial integrity, which I think is going to play into the hands of the righteous king, as we've been projecting, this white horse, which in our view has to be the righteous Sunni king, which at this point looks like the king of Jordan, the Hashemite king, who's the other descendant of Muhammad on the scene right now. You have this al-Baghdadi, extremist chopping people's heads off, claiming to be the caliph. And then you have Jordan's king, who put the big flag up years ago, the Hashemite flag, the revolution flag, the Caliphate flag, and said, I'm the spokesperson for Islam. And so it appears that this is the clash that's coming, as we've been seeing it. And so I see that this is all still coming out quite nicely in the news, or if you read between the lines the way I'm trying to do, to point out that Syria's got to be part of his his caliphate, and so maintaining its integrity leads to this idea that, okay, somebody's got to rule these people, and here's the righteous king who doesn't want to kill all the Shia, doesn't want to kill the Christians, doesn't want to kill the Jews. He just wants everybody to live in peace and harmony. He's been leading this not integration, but acceptance of the monotheistic faiths. He's the one that asked for the fifth minaret to be built up on the Temple Mount, and is apparently agreeing to let the Jews rebuild their temple. So he becomes the absolutely perfect candidate if you're looking to find someone who fits the scriptural role of a false Messiah, or a Messiah at all, that the Jews can claim Messiah, since they're obviously not going to claim Jesus as the Messiah. So I want to read just a couple of more paragraphs, Dad, because this really, to me, sets the tone that we've been looking for. Okay, Anthony Blinken, the U.S. Deputy Secretary of State, who spoke Saturday, this is last Saturday, a week before Saturday, at the International Institute for Strategic Studies, Manama Dialogue in Bahrain, said the U.S. government believes it's only a matter of time before Moscow realizes that its military intervention and its ardent support for Assad's continued rule are mistakes, after which the Russian government could support a political process that includes replacing Assad. So now we're saying, yeah, Russia's going to realize that, and you'll see why here in a minute. Let me keep reading. Russia's intervention, this is a quote from this Blinken, Russia's intervention in Syria is a prime example of the law of unintended consequences. It will have two primary effects, Blinken said. First, it will increase Russia's leverage over Assad, but second, it will increase the conflict's leverage over Russia, and that will create a compelling incentive to Russia to work for, not against, a political solution. So what I'm seeing here is, before the Great War can come, there has to be this other resolution, right? The one that puts where everybody gives the crown to the Hashemite king to stop this what they will be able to show is this false caliphate, this al-Baghdadi, this maniac, this terrorist that's terrorizing the world. And so Russia's going to realize that there's a better way than going to war with the U.S., is what I'm seeing that says. But the scary part is it says, second, it will increase the conflict's leverage over Russia. Now, what could that mean? Increase the conflict's leverage, which sounds like more people are going to die, more bombs are going to drop, and Russia will realize that they can't do it by killing people and dropping bombs. Next paragraph. Russia will not be able to afford to sustain its military intervention in Syria for long, Blinken said, and sooner rather than later, the economic, political, and security costs will force Russia to reevaluate its Syria policy. He said Russia will be dragged into a quagmire. You're going to watch, because if I get to another article and can find the quote, I found it twice this week in 6 or 7 articles, the word quagmire, that of course Cheney used 20 years ago. That seems to be the word they want. That's the politically correct word right now for this civil war that's coming. the way I'm seeing it. He said Russia will be dragged into a quagmire, and he expressed confidence that Russia would come around to the realization that in order to solve Syria, it will have to agree to Assad's departure. So in other words, after more people die and more bombs are dropped and it's costing money on every side, he'll finally realize he can't break us, and if we can't break him, there's only one thing left to do, and that's agree to a political solution. So anyway, next paragraph. Russia has a choice now on how to move forward, and we would welcome it making the right choice for our shared interests. After he spoke, a series of officials and experts from the countries that are allied with the United States on the Syria issue openly disagreed with the contention there was any significant chance Russia would come around to the Western view on Assad's future. So see, we're playing the good guy. Oh, Russia's going to realize after we kill a few more people and we all spend millions and hundreds of millions of dollars of our people's money on this quagmire, they'll come around to a political solution, but all of our allies disagree. The British Foreign Secretary, Philip Hammond, told me, this is this reporter, he had good reason to be skeptical of that optimism. So anyway, I don't want to have to read the whole article, but this is obviously the point here. We're saying a little while longer of all of us just like a hot Cold War. We're not fighting Russia, but we're both sending guns in to sort of claim to fight ISIS, but we're sort of at odds against each other, and Russia's going to find out that that's not going to work. So it's interesting that these two countries aren't willing to negotiate that before spending hundreds of millions of dollars. And I mean, if it's really such a quagmire, if there's really no way for Russia to do anything but spend money, are they so stupid they don't know that? They don't know they're up against the U.S. and allied forces, and that we're obviously not going to pull our guns out of there. And if they're not going to pull their guns out of there, how much farther does this all have to go? Well, I'm going to predict that it has to go until more bad things happen, as they already have with the downing of that Russian aircraft, which now I'm sure I don't watch the news because it makes me sick to my stomach to just be bombarded by the lies amidst all the soundbite propaganda and all the advertising and all the the mind-numbing distraction to prepare Americans for war, or to keep them so distracted that war just seems to come upon them like it was an organic undertaking. So this is the first article that I wanted to mention. It was I'm going to take these in order of chronological order. So this is the oldest one from last Saturday, and I thought there was a couple of more paragraphs in here that might be good to read, but anyway, you read it for yourself. This is Russia. No one but U.S. believes Russia will abandon Assad, by Josh Rogan. Okay, on to the next article. U.S. pledges nearly $100 million to support Syrian opposition. And United States ramped up its support for Syria's opposition. Sorry, this is from AP, I guess that's Associated Press, by Adam Schreck, October 31st. Also from last week. This is out of Bahrain. The United States ramped up its support for Syrian opposition with a pledge of nearly $100 million in fresh aid on Saturday. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia's top diplomat described the timing of the departure of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad and the withdrawal of foreign fighters as top sticking points to finding a lasting resolution. So see, they're keeping us all in this with this new propaganda about we're just stuck on when he's going to leave. So Russia's going to have to keep bombing and sending hundreds of millions of dollars. America's going to have to keep bombing and sending hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, what did we read a few weeks ago, Dad? The president was talking about trying to avoid disaster, right? Unintentional consequences. I read that again this week. I don't know if I'll come across the quotes now as I'm trying to bring us all up to date, but unintentional consequences, recipe for disaster, and yet we're all just going to keep pushing it because at some point we're saying Russia's going to realize it can't afford to. It can't just keep trying to keep Assad in there, but we're going to present that that's all they want to do. They're just too stupid to know that they're going to have to come to the table, which wouldn't you think that would be the smart thing? Well, they still got the money and the bases before more stuff gets ruined. You'd think you'd come and negotiate, well, okay, let's get Assad out of there and let's put someone in there that, in other words, we're not going to, as from Russia's standpoint, as long as I get to keep my bases, as long as you're not going to try and pull some sort of United Nations move and get me out of there, then yeah, let's have some new elections. Let's find a new leader for Syria, but on certain conditions. But that's not brought up, of course, not yet. Here's something I found interesting out of this article. The American promise of cash, which it says brings to nearly $500 million, the amount it has pledged to the opposition since 2012, came a day after the U.S. announced it was intensifying its fight against the Islamic State group in Syria with the deployment of up to 50 Special Forces operation troops. Now I know that's all over the mainstream media, so yeah, 50 troops. I keep thinking, what could they be doing? Well, these must be the people that are showing people how to use these weapons we're sending in there, right? I mean, what else could it be? Or setting the weapons, getting them in place, setting all the dials, right? I don't know what 50 Special Forces troops could be doing. They're obviously not running around with guns shooting ISIS. So I imagine they're there because they're the ones doing the programming of the weapons, positioning of the weapons, deciding on the logistics and perhaps showing the top people that we're supporting, here's how you fire these things when we tell you to. But keep that in mind, $500 million we've spent in the last 3 years, right? America, $500 million, that would be $500 million, right? And just want to get that straight because we're going to come to an article here later where we find out Iran has spent billions. And I thought, ooh, when I read that struck me as odd. Iran, you mean the country that's had sanctions on it the last few years? Iran that doesn't have one single nuclear weapon? Iran, I don't know what kind of, where are they getting the billions to fund Assad, where we're only got $500 million in 3 years. This would be the same 3 years I think we've had sanctions on Iran. So, I mean, what kind of fight is this from our standpoint that we put in $500 million, and that's only $500 million now after the new $100 million. So for 3 years, it's only been $400 million, 0.4 of a billion. But Iran has already spent billions of dollars. So interesting to me. They're outspending us by some, what factor? 4 to 1, 5 to 1? Okay. But we're spending more to intensify our fight. I wonder what Iran's billions are doing to oppose our 500 million. So anyway, this is all right now just to lay down the context that what I'm seeing and what I've been saying for weeks and months is that this is all to build up to Armageddon, and you can't do that if you don't have the guns that the bankers have been supporting Russia to build for the last, 10, 20 years, the guns that America's been building and funneling into Saudi Arabia and Iraq and Jordan. These guns all have to eventually fire at each other. And so we've been told the danger of it. Obama told us about the disastrous consequences, and yet both sides are still just sending in not just money, but wait till you hear about the guns. All right, so next article. Oh, I love these guys. This is Business Insider. So you can expect a beautiful graphic on this one. Now, here we go with the guns. This is from November 3rd, Business Insider by Jeremy Bender. The U.S. is moving jets intended for air-to-air combat to Syria, and Russia might be why. So isn't that interesting? Well, I guess we're expecting some air-to-air combat with Russia. Let me just read just a little bit of this. Russia's military intervention in Syria in support of the regime of Bashar al-Assad has made U.S. operations in the country more complicated. Although both countries are purportedly fighting ISIS, their larger strategies are at a cross purpose in Syria, where the U.S. advocates a political transition in which Assad eventually steps down. Now, in the latest sign of growing tensions between the U.S. and Russia in Syria, the U.S. is sending planes equipped only with air-to-air weaponry to the region, David Axe reports for the Daily Beast. As Axe notes, Russia's the only potential U.S. adversary in Syria with its own combat aircraft. So ISIS don't have no combat aircraft, right? But we're sending in aircraft to do combat with Russia's aircraft, which means that we're so serious about getting Assad out of there. We're willing to get, to me, that just, here's your unintended consequences, right? Now you got aircraft flying around that are made to shoot down other aircraft, and the only two kinds of aircraft in the air are Russia and the United States. So, it's all just blah, 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 but I'm trying to get to, I'm trying to build a context here for people so when they read this stuff, they can read between the lines. And again, go read these articles if you want. Business Insider, the U.S. is moving jets intended for air-to-air combat to Syria, and Russia might be why. Of course, it comes with, as all the Business Insider articles do, with a fantastic graphic that shows where everybody is, where the fighting is. It's just blows me away. We can't even put a dent in ISIS, even though we know right where everybody is. So that's that article. Next article, which is sort of a adjacent, or it's one of these things that's, as I'm trying to point out, the way Turkey's now got itself in a, everybody's getting into this quagmire. I want to point out how many countries are being brought into this, that satisfies the scriptural prediction of wars and rumors of wars, or as my Bible, the Eastern text, says, revolutions and rumors of wars, and how the Armageddon points to this time of trouble. Not just that one battle. It's a time of trouble as the world's never seen before. And so, to that end, this is something else by this Josh Rogan, the Bloomberg View columnist, and its title is Iran and Saudi Arabia Clash Inside Syria Talks. Of course, they just had these talks in Bahrain and Vienna, and the point of this one is that Saudi Arabia is upset at Iran helping Assad, of course. And let's see, I'm just looking for if I can find some of the parts of this article. The Saudi foreign minister traveled to Bahrain the next day and spoke forcefully against the Iranian involvement in Syria at the International Institute for Strategic Studies Manama Dialogue. He set two red lines for any Saudi agreement for a way forward in Syria: that there must be a date and means for the departure of Syrian President Assad, and that all foreign forces, especially Iranian troops, must leave Syria at the beginning of a political process. Iran has hundreds of fighters in Syria and supports thousands of Hezbollah soldiers. Quote, "It is up to the Iranians whether they want to have relations with us based on good neighborliness, or if they want to have relations that are filled with tension," he said. that is on Iran. So, of course, Saudi Arabia, the client state of the United States, creating this tension now, or expressing this tension that they're not about to do anything different, meaning funding these rebel forces against Assad, unless Iran, there's going to be they're not going to stop the guns and the killing unless Iran withdraws its forces and acts like a good neighbor with Saudi Arabia, which we all know that's not going to happen. I'm pointing out this is what's leading to the civil war and the conflict. It's all in the news if you just read between the lines with some sort of context that makes sense. And that was, this article's from November 4th by Josh Rogan. The next article, Dad, from November 5th, Associated Press by Robert Burns, points again to these wars and rumors of wars, all this time of trouble that's coming. The title of this one is Pentagon Chief Takes Jab at China with Aircraft Carrier Stop. So our Defense Secretary, Ash Carter, went to the USS Theodore Roosevelt, which we've got in the South China Sea, and made a comment about, let's see if I can find it. Carter said his visit and the presence of the hulking warship should not be seen as a new twist to the U.S. naval presence in Asia, but he made no bones about the signal he was sending by visiting and rising tensions with China, amid rising tensions with China. Quote, if it's being noted today in a special way, it's because of the tension in this part of the world, mostly arising from disputes over land features in the South China Sea, he said, and most of the activity over the last year being perpetrated by China. There's a lot of concern about Chinese behavior out here, he told reporters traveling with him. So, of course, you've got China building this military base on an atoll, and everybody seems to be this Subi Reef and in the Spratly Islands, and everybody's claiming that that's they're building up for military conflict. Okay, why China is suddenly, last I heard, again, they not only been making $1 an hour for the last 100 years, but their financial system's as broke as ours. It's all built on, first of all, U.S. treasuries, which are practically worthless. It's all built on a fraudulent stock market that's propped up by, the same way ours is, by the bankers funding it to keep it looking like something that it's not. Remember, China's got all these ghost cities that it built to make it look like they had financial strength. So again, where is their play in a war? What money have they got? What risk are they going to take? That they're building military, and that we're afraid of China now. All this stuff that seems quite new to me seems to all just be, it just comes out of thin air. When did China get these sort of, when did it become their desire to get into a war stance? But everybody seems to be in a war stance today, regardless of the consequences. Which, again, if you think, though, that everybody knows we're coming to a war and you got to choose up sides and your strings are being pulled by the bankers, which side you're going to fund, where are your guns, who your guns are going to be pointed at, right? This is what I'm seeing. And they're bringing the guns in from all over the world is what I want to have hit home, in the idea of getting closer to Armageddon and trying to reconcile these mouthpiece, wag the dog lies, propaganda journalism with what we know to be or what we suspect through our scriptural study to be where we're at in history and what's coming. Okay, next article, AP by Zina Karam, November 5th. IS bomb on Russia plane would herald new phase in conflict. Now, to me, this really is the breakthrough article of the week for me. All the rest is quite predictable. But this plane going down in Egypt, Dad, and the idea now that what they're saying is this is going to bring it to a whole new level, not just the war on ISIS, but the potential of ISIS. And I think this is an important one. I want to read a couple of paragraphs from this. At this stage, there is no hard evidence, which now is not true. We're going to find out that there's becoming more hard evidence. The last article I read just yesterday said that the cockpit recorder had recorded an explosion, and so it's becoming more and more. The wag the dog propaganda is going to tell us that there was a bomb on that plane. Somebody blew that plane up. It didn't crash on accident. Who blew that plane up? Well, this article is going to stay. This article, I think, is going to show you where we're going with that. At this stage, there's no hard evidence, but reports from the U.S. and Britain suggesting an Islamic State group bomb may have caused the Russian plane crash in Egypt are raising the alarm among experts who say such an act would be a frightening change in tactics by the extremist group. It would also underscore the failure so far of the U.S.-led coalition to deter the jihadists, despite the recent addition of Russia to the seemingly formidable forces arrayed against them, right? So, yeah, even though you got the U.S. and all of the allies, including in the region, right? You've got Jordan, you've got Egypt, you've got Saudi Arabia, you've got Israel, and now you got Russia, and they've all got planes bombing ISIS. ISIS has got 100 Toyota trucks, but son of a gun, U.S.-led coalition just can't deter these guys. So Russian and Egyptian officials say any talk about a bomb is premature. Remember, this is a few days ago. It's not premature anymore. And aviation authorities are working on all possible theories as to why the Airbus crashed Saturday in Egypt's chaotic Sinai Peninsula, 23 minutes after takeoff. Still, British Prime Minister David Cameron said Thursday it was, quote, more likely than not that an explosive device brought the jetliner down. I don't know how he knows that. I mean, if the airline authorities don't know, I wonder how the Prime Minister Cameron, who, as far as I know, what prime ministers and presidents do is play golf and, listen to what they're told to say. So I'm not sure where he gets the forensic evidence or the experience. Why does David Cameron know? Why do we, why is he saying that? Why is he saying, I don't know, I'm waiting for the experts to tell me. But he says Thursday it was more likely than not that an explosive device brought the jetliner down. If that proves to be true, and if the Islamic State group was responsible, it would be the Sunni extremists' largest act of transnational terrorism by far. While the Islamic State group has claimed responsibility for deadly attacks that struck tourists in Tunisia and Shiite mosques in oil-rich Sunni Gulf countries, claims that have not been proven, it has so far refrained from spectacular Al-Qaeda-style attacks on airliners. It has focused instead on seizing and expanding territory it already holds in Syria and Iraq and establishing branches in other countries like Egypt and Libya. Of course, our journalism will never point out how it was possible that this little band of rebels from a year ago that were just, nothing, few thousand strong, were able to expand in Syria in the face of all these forces, the United Nations forces, Israel, Jordan, the Mossad, the intelligence industry, all of these people who would have quite a substantial stake in keeping these people from expanding. And yet there's no word about that. It's been focused on seizing and expanding territory somehow that they could do before they even got all the Toyota trucks. I guess they were just sticks and stones, but they were able to seize territory. Remember how we read a few weeks ago, Dad, or now it's been a month or more, the safe zone there in northern Syria at the border of Turkey, that Turkey and the United States supported Syrian rebels were routed by ISIS. So they're just so powerful with their Toyota trucks that no matter all the weapons we have, when we declare a safe zone, what was it, 60 miles long, that we were routed, you know. So anyway, I just it's like watching a bad movie. But this is important. I want to keep reading this. And while some attacks in the West may have been inspired by the group, there has been no clear evidence that any of them was planned or directed by the group itself. Now, of course, I want to point out this can change, and this is what I appear is going to change in the near future. We're going to find out how many attacks they're behind, and we're going to see this sort of thing increase. And I believe Europe's going to become involved at some point, which is what's going to stimulate the real push by the Christian world to now be ready to go to all-out war at all costs. Quote, the Sinai attack would be a first, and it would signal that the Islamic State has become both capable of and interested in joining the dreadful ranks of global terrorism. Isn't that funny? They're not global terrorists yet because they go to Tunisia and kill people. They go to Saudi Arabia and kill people. They chop off the heads of Canadians or Christians and other. That doesn't make them global terrorists. But now that they blow up a plane 23 minutes out of Egypt, they're not only capable of, but interested in joining the dreadful ranks of global terrorism, concluded an analysis by the Sufan Group, a private geopolitical risk assessment company. Given the Islamic State militants' success in creating mayhem in the region through its brutal tactics and ferocious fanaticism, such a metamorphosis would be a major challenge for security services around the world. I mean, this is what I want to get through. Now remember, the Al-Qaeda, I guess is what we were told, attempted to blow up the World Trade Center in 1991. Not sure how a bomb in the basement was going to blow up the World Trade Center, but they attempted a terrorist act all the way back in 91, right? They ran that, where was that PT boat that they ran, they ran a suicide mission right into one of our ships there. I can't recall the exact circumstances, but that was Al-Qaeda. So I mean, for 25 years Al-Qaeda's been doing it, and they never became this sort of force, right? They apparently had far more reach. As I remember, they were a highly diffused group of people all over Europe. Remember, Al-Qaeda was one of these groups this was the biggest terrorist group in the world. But hey, we killed Osama bin Laden, and so there you go. I guess they just crumbled into the darkness. But now this Islamic State, who started as a flag on a quiet street a year ago, and then was some 3,000 people shortly after that, I mean, they're unstoppable. And now we're being told that if such a metamorphosis, you mean that they got a bomb on a plane in Egypt, and now they've joined the ranks of global terrorism, and if such a metamorphosis would be a major challenge for security services around the world. If that doesn't tell you, watch out around the world, false flags coming your way, then you and I are reading the story differently. Okay, I want to keep going because to me, this is really the big step now that we're making toward World War III, and of course first this Shia-Sunni civil war and the rise of the white horse out of Revelation that's given a crown to go forth conquering to conquer, and in his train comes war and death and famine. War and famine and death. Back to the article. But IS has not offered any details to back its claim. While releasing specifics would add credibility, the group may be withholding either because its claim is false, or because doing so would undermine plans for similar attacks in the future, or because the aura of mystery might deepen its mystique among die-hard followers. I mean, does that just sound like crap to you or what? Why wouldn't die-hard followers who are trying to kill the devil, the enemy, this Western power that's oppressing them, why wouldn't they be thrilled to know that we pulled off an international incident like Al-Qaeda? We're growing. We can blow up planes. You better be scared of us. What would be the use? What aura of mystery of not knowing whether we did it? How would that help me as a die-hard follower? I'd think, well, I don't know if we really can do that. I don't know if we did it or not. But if ISIS had proved they did it, I mean, it couldn't make the world any madder at them, could it? I mean, if Russia and America can't stop them now, what is blowing up a plane? I mean, how does that help us? If they can blow up a plane, it just means we're in a more terrorized position, and I would think it would enhance its mystique, its credibility among its die-hard followers. They'd be that much more encouraged, I would imagine. So again, I read these articles and it all sounds like bad fiction. It's like a B movie and worse. A U.S. official briefed on the matter said that intercepted communications played a role in the tentative conclusion that the Islamic State group Sinai affiliate planted an explosive device on the plane. Now, you're going to see that there's, I don't know, maybe in the mainstream media, everybody listening to me already knows that we've pinned it down now because we've got the voice box recorder. There's intercepted communications that I think Britain intercepted. So, again, I think we are going to be able to pin this on Islamic State because that's what the false flags meant. That's what this is for. But right now, in this article from a few days ago, we're talking about the tentative conclusion that, hey, we think one of their affiliates, their Sinai affiliate. So let's keep going with this article. However, the official added that if it was a bomb, intelligence analysts don't believe IS leaders in Syria ordered the operation, but rather that it was planned and executed by the group's Sinai affiliate, which operates autonomously. Now, again, I find this, hey, is this bad writing or what? This is a caliphate. These people think that they're following the caliph. This is Muhammad's leader. They're going to just do stuff outside. I mean, these people, you've read before, they've got a very strict regiment of orders that come down, not just from Baghdadi, but this council, right? These imams that are on this council that have to decide whose head to cut off. Right? Their followers aren't just allowed to go out and, loose cannon on deck. That's not the way a caliphate runs. That's not the way the caliph of Muhammad leads the people in righteous jihad. So I find that spurious, autonomously. These people are just blowing up planes in the name of ISIS autonomously. But the other side to that, I believe, that is meaningful is it shows the loose cannon perspective, which makes us all able to believe now that, it doesn't even have to come down from the top. Some crazy group, like what did they tell us about the refugees? We're sneaking in terrorists with the refugees, right? So even if some terrorist that was snuck in with the refugees isn't getting an official word from Syria, I guess we're being shown that the affiliate group in Germany, or the affiliate group in England, or the affiliate group in Turkey, or some such thing, could go ahead and blow up a plane in one of these countries, and it not really, you can have this sort of plausible denial. Oh, geez, well, we didn't order it, but darn it, that's how dangerous this group is getting, is where I see all this going. The Islamic State group's insistent series of responsibility claims suggest it is trying to boost its global credentials. Until now, the main advantage it has claimed over Al-Qaeda is its hold over a significant chunk of territory in Iraq and Syria. Again, forgetting to give us any construction of how that's even possible, that Iraq, where our military bases are, where our intervention 13, 14 years ago, Afghanistan, these places where we have such a militaristic presence and a intelligence presence, and have done so much damage and restructuring through our money and support, right? We are the ones that supported the elections in Iraq. Theoretically, you'd think it'd be really hard to come into a country where we're trying to reestablish it in our narrative, and a band of rebels with nothing but some Toyota trucks and rocket launchers are able to take significant portions of this territory. That all just sounds so fabricated to me. So now we got Al-Tamimi, an expert on rebel and Islamic extremist groups and a fellow at the Middle East Forum think tank, said bombing a jetliner becomes a significant one-up in the rivalry with Al-Qaeda, right? These guys are trying to show they're even stronger. I mean, what I say is they're trying to show the world, you think you were afraid of Al-Qaeda. You think Osama bin Laden could bring down things like the Twin Towers. Hey, these guys are trying to show they're even bigger than Al-Qaeda. Quote, if the Islamic State is capable of conducting attacks like this, particularly against a target now widely reviled, Russia, this could bolster their appeal in the jihad world, right? Just what I was saying. That why wouldn't their diehard followers be absolutely thrilled to know, hey, look what we're able to do, and we did it against Russia, who's come in to bomb us. So look at how powerful we are. We didn't just do it to, Yemen or Jordan or some poor country. We did it to Russia, who's there bombing our targets. We blew up one of their planes. If a bomb brought down the plane, I'm back to the article here. If a bomb brought down the plane, it would not be the first time a Russian jetliner was targeted by Islamic militants. 2 suicide attackers brought down 2 Russian planes over Russia in 2004, killing 89 people. Attacks claimed by Chechen rebels. Chechens and other militants from the northern Caucasus still have lots of reasons to strike at Russian targets. Yeah, because their Chechen rebels are the ones funded by America to create the constant strife and war. They're our terrorists. So our terrorists brought down Russian airliners to keep the tensions going. Back to the article. IS regularly uses high-tech propaganda videos, including those showing the beheadings of foreign hostages, as a form of psychological warfare. I'm not sure whether they mean high-tech propaganda videos here as fake. It doesn't sound like it. It sounds like they're making nice movies. This ISIS has got all that capability. I mean, they only have the capability to take over an oil refinery and somehow get the oil into hands of customers and get the money back to them and use that money to buy weapons from who? But they also got, their hands on high-tech equipment to make these propaganda videos, which of course nobody shuts down off the internet. Where America anyway, and Europe, we're happy to show them and terrorize our own people. And there's no mention here that a lot of this high-tech video is fake. Many people have pointed to the fact that these high-tech videos were like the high-tech video showing plastic-tipped aluminum aircraft flying into steel buildings made to withstand the impact of multiple jet airliners, much greater, much stronger, larger than the ones that flew right into them like the buildings were made of paper. You mean that kind of high-tech equipment that lets you look like you're beheading someone, but it's not actually real? So they don't mention that here. They just are scaring us. They just want us to be scared, not informed. Back to the article. Those gruesome videos have sent shockwaves across the globe and appear to have succeeded in installing terror outside their base territory without having to actually attack. although there have been some gruesome killings around the region, including beheading a group of Ethiopian laborers in Libya. In recent days, IS for the first time explicitly threatened Israel in videos featuring a militant speaking fluent Hebrew. If they make good on this threat, the potential for escalation is huge. Now, I don't know how much more you could escalate chopping the heads off Christians, mass graves, the sort of terrorism that's even terrorizing their own Sunni population, as we read last week, Dad, if you remember, right? The Muslims are leaving in droves, and they're having to put electronic gates around the cities that they control to keep their own Sunni populations from escaping their radicalized terror that even the Sunnis, the moderate Sunnis, don't want any part of. But that's, of course, not, that escalation's not big enough to go in and stop them. But gosh darn it, if they make good on this threat, explicitly threatened Israel, IS for the first time. And what have I been saying, Dad? I mean, I just have to keep drawing attention to this because, of course, we get 100 hits a week, 200 hits a week, and all the BS propaganda out there, is getting anything from 10,000 to 100,000 hits a week, acting as if all this stuff is real. How are we going to combat ISIS? Oh, what's our strategy now that Russia has come into it? All this kind of crap. And we've been pointing out for now some time, since ISIS was a flag, I said, the whole point of this will be to eventually threaten Israel. Israel will have to be mortally threatened so that we have all out, now there's nothing that can be done but all out war. And I say that that's going to be combined with Jordan and the Hashemite king somehow interceding, somehow putting its forces in the middle and saving Israel or coming to the aid of Israel or, doing something that shows that, look, they tried to make good on an attack in Israel and Jordan came to the rescue. So anyway, here we go, Dad. This is the first time I've seen it. They're claiming it's the first time explicitly threatened Israel. If they make good on this threat, the potential for escalation is huge. Did I not write this 6 months ago? Back to the article. Such ambition underscores the extreme challenge facing the U.S.-led coalition. Part of the challenge is the group's geographic dispersal. It has branched out from its base in Syria and Iraq, adding affiliates in Egypt, Sinai, Afghanistan, Libya, and Yemen. Of course, that's, Egypt. Interesting that all of this happened since Mubarak fell and we had an Arab Spring. There wasn't no big Al-Qaeda problems in Egypt, right? Because, of course, Egypt was our ally and Mubarak was our, we were supporting him and his regime. So Egypt, Sinai, Afghanistan, where, of course, we've still got our troops watching the poppy fields, where we've been in that country with troops for 14 years. But somehow this IS, where are they getting the people? Their own Sunni population are scared of them. We know from the facts that Saudi Arabia is paying $1,000 a day to hire these mercenaries to be these sort of terrorists that can be part of this group. Otherwise, of course, nobody would. The Sunnis don't want that. Nobody wants to be. There's nothing in the Quran that justifies this. You can't be any kind of Muslim and be part of the Islamic State or this so-called Caliphate. So this is all so preposterous that if you don't read between the lines and have some sort of foundation to build these stupid house of card, wag the dog, mouthpiece articles on, well, you're really going to be driven around like the wind tossing the waves, aren't you? So anyway, Libya, the other country that had one of the highest standards of living in the world, a leader that'd been there for 3.5 decades, no such problems in Libya, but now that the NATO went in and crucified in the most politically incorrect way. When you look at the way Libya's regime was taken down and how all of a sudden now you have nothing but strife in this country that was one of the highest standards of living, one of the greatest um, non-military efforts in the history of mankind to build that river, that man-made river across the desert. Libya should have been a country that people looked toward as a potential of moderate Islamic culture, what could happen if they wanted. But instead now, and then Yemen, I don't know enough of my history of Yemen. I just know that those poor Houthis are more from the indigenous people like the Taliban, and of course you can't have that. These people don't want this future that's coming, and they're willing to fight, and so they have to be destroyed. But Egypt, Afghanistan, and Libya, as far as I know, are people that were all on our radar for the last 10, 15 years and more, and there was no such problems there. And now, since the Arab Spring, ISIS, these people that were just a band of rebels who even the Sunnis can't stand their radicalized Islam, who Saudi Arabia has to pay for their mercenaries, but they're expanding into the countries where we've had investment for decades, and son of a gun, we just can't stop them or even put a dent in them. I want to go on with this article. The U.S. and its allies have been bombing IS in Iraq since August 2014, extending the campaign to Syria a month later. Russia recently joined the fray, launching an aerial campaign against the group in Syria on September 30th. Iranian-backed militias in both countries are fighting the group on the ground. Yet IS has not been pushed back an inch in its strongholds of Mosul in Iraq and Raqqa in Syria. Now, I'm assuming these are the places where they have to pen in their people, the Sunnis that are trying to escape, that, as we read last week, Dad, are leaving in droves, right? But we haven't been able to push back an inch. We can't even make headway into these cities where they can't even get support by their own people. I mean, does that sound realistic? I mean, what do you not have to be brain dead reading these things as if they're giving you the facts to believe that the world is the way they're painting it? Where's the money behind all this stuff? And why did the money that's been behind Egypt and the invasion of Iraq and why are we unable, not only the US-led coalition, which of course means Jordan, Israel, Saudi Arabia in that region, who cares, Britain and France and these people, but the people in that region where you'd think, there's intelligence, where some of these people are from, right? You know where they're going. You know who they can contact, where the assets are that they need to go after. And the people that don't want them there are already there. So you're telling me you can't fortify some of these assets? It's just outrageous to me. Back to the article, Dad. In another incremental step, Obama announced last week the U.S. would deploy up to 50 U.S. Special Operations troops into northern Syria to assist in the fight against IS. The question now becomes whether a bomb planted by IS on an airliner will spur more serious and decisive action to destroy the group. And I see this is where we're heading now, if I can throw out some of my projections so that people can judge whether I'm got my finger on the pulse or whether the New York Times has their finger on the pulse. I'm saying yes, more planes are going to come down, or more bridges are going to come down, or more schools are going to be blown up, or more railways are going to be blown up. Some horrible damage is going to be done across Europe, possibly the United States, possibly Israel, because this is exactly what we have to have, a more serious and decisive action to destroy the group, which it seems, to haul it back into the scriptural relevancy, must be led by this white horse king, the opening of the first seal of Revelation, where a crown is given to him and he goes forth conquering and to conquer, and war follows him. The red horse of war follows the white righteous king. Not peace, war follows him. So this is what I'm seeing. This is the war they're predicting here, the more serious and decisive action to destroy the group. What have I been saying for months, Dad? It would have to be, right? They have to get so atrocious and so big and so scary that only some greater engagement can stop them. The question, sorry, I just read that. An official with the U.S.-led coalition in Iraq said a bomb on an aircraft is a somewhat isolated incident and would be hard to replicate, adding that it wouldn't necessarily demand a change in coalition tactics. See, one bomb isn't enough, okay? The attack will play into Putin's narrative the IS needs to be fought in Syria now before it poses an even bigger threat to Russia. All right, so this confirms Russia's commitment. They blew up a Russian plane, and you know, these sort of militants have blown up 2 Russian planes before, so Russia now has a real reason to stay in this, and that's pretty much the end of the article, Dad. So, you know, I hope people are seeing the context I'm trying to lay down, and while I've got just another minute, let me get to just a couple of more headlines. This one out of the Fiscal Times by Rob Garver. And remember, to me, Fiscal Times, Business Insider, this is, you know, white-collar information. This is what they want the average American driving around in their BMW, heading to work at their $100,000 a year job, in debt up to their eyeballs, needing the status quo to continue. And this includes Europe, all of our Western countries, who the white-collar people that want the status quo to continue. They feel, you know, they're the ones that have to be threatened, not just with their life necessarily, but their economy. Hey, you're going to lose that BMW. You're going to lose work. You might be homeless pretty soon, because what's that going to do to a good Christian? Kill those son of a guns, right? Kill them, kill them, kill them. Like Viktor Orban here in Hungary. That's what the Christians have to be brought to. So the title of this one, Fiscal Times by Rob Garver, Putin moves anti-aircraft missiles into Syria. Why? Huh? A Russian military official on Thursday told the domestic media that President Vladimir Putin's effort to support the regime of Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad had expanded to include not just thousands of personnel to man fighter planes and helicopters, but also sophisticated anti-aircraft missiles, including the Panzer and Buk systems. The announcement that Russia found it necessary to bring in missiles capable of destroying advanced military aircraft raised eyebrows among Western nations currently operating in the region, because the 2 forces Russia's helping Assad fight, the terror group ISIS and a loose coalition of rebel groups battling to oust Assad, don't have any planes to use against Russian or Syrian forces. Okay, I'm not going to read the rest of this article, but you get the point. As I started with, air-to-air combat now, right? We're sending in planes that only have air-to-air capabilities. Who are we going to fight but the only other country in there with aircraft? That's Russia. Russia's sending in anti-aircraft missiles. Geez, if this doesn't sound like it's going to, what Obama said a few weeks ago, this potential for disaster, geez, let's no one talk about that. We're just setting up for it. Now we got planes in the air that can shoot each other down, missiles on the ground that can shoot down our planes. How easy is that now for a false flag incident? For one of our boys or girls in a jet to be shot down while all they're trying to do is patrol safe airspace. And now one of these anti-aircraft missiles shoots them down. And now you got the tensions heightened to, you know, war tensions. Okay, so that's what I see coming out of that. And the last art, I'm sorry, let me give you that. That was Fiscal Times from November 6th, 2 days ago. by Rob Garver. And now the last article I want to point to is from yesterday, Business Insider again. So, of course, you're going to get a lovely graphic showing every airstrike in Syria and who it's against. And they got a picture here of the Toyota trucks marching through town with the ISIS flags. And the Business Insider by Jeremy Bender from November 7th, and the title, Russia is sending a message to Syrians under ISIS control, and it's making more join the terrorist group. And what they're saying here is, on November 3rd, Russia carried out a series of heavy airstrikes against ISIS's de facto capital of Raqqa, Syria. I mean, it's about time somebody struck at their capital, but unfortunately, because Russia only has sort of, we've read in many other articles, Dad, the military capability of the United States. I've pointed out articles in which they've said their airplanes are better than our airplanes, their jet fighters. They've got all this high-tech weaponry that can pinpoint targets, etc., etc. So they're able to go into the capital now. However, the strikes, Reuters reports, citing the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, killed 42 people, including an estimated 27 civilians. Although the strikes were seemingly aimed against ISIS, they also damaged a hospital and 2 bridges. This information came from activists Abu Ibram Raqawi of Raqqa, Syria. He's from the group Raqqa is being slaughtered silently, and he relayed the info to Business Insider over Skype. How convenient for Business Insider. The hospitals and bridges, which Raqawi said are symbols of the city and a source of local pride, are used by ISIS and local civilians. The strikes, Raqawi said, were meant as a threat. Excuse me. So, without reading the rest of this mouthpiece article, the point hopefully is clear. Russia, of course, just the barbarians that they are, the equipment that apparently, we've learned before is just as sophisticated as ours. They knew what they were bombing, a hospital and bridges that are symbol of that city's pride. So they're willing to kill civilians. They're willing to damage the city without targeting just ISIS. I mean, and I just want to point out lastly, Dad, with the technology, wouldn't you think you could target these Toyota trucks? I mean, they show the picture in this very article after a picture of a bomb going off from the air. No idea exactly where that is. It's just the picture of a bomb, and you just see some geography below, and what looks like a few buildings, but of course it's impossible to tell, exactly where that is. And nobody is, they're just going to say where it is, but they're not going to actually identify it on a Google map, and so that we know. But then the picture below that is of these ISIS trucks marching through town. Now, you'd think with the technology and planes in the air that could fly right over the city, I mean, these guys don't have anti-aircraft capability, not that can take down the sophisticated aircraft that, they can put a bomb on a plane, but they can't shoot down F-15s, F-16s, right? That's what we've been told. So why can't these planes of Russia fly right over and blow up these lines of Toyota trucks as a statement? Why would they blow up things that are going to kill civilians and cause international outrage? All right. So the quote here, Russia wants the civilians to suffer so that they can say, oh, you want to live with ISIS? Well, this is what will happen to you. So they're bombing lots of areas full of civilians. So I say that's not true, or it's done as a false flag more than likely. I don't imagine civilians are being killed because this is how false flags have their effect. But I think the effect is to continue to raise these tensions rather than any sort of accurate reporting as to what's going on. Because as you can see, what this is all leading to is this disastrous situation that Obama's been predicting. So anyway, Dad, that's I really believe that what the media is showing me this week is that we're getting closer to the situation I've been predicting since we saw that first ISIS flag. This is the group that's being raised up to be the group so terrible that only an all-out offensive against it will do. And they're proving that to the world now by showing that no matter how much American or Russian involvement, even though here's two people on two different sides, that are raising, and meanwhile has the added benefit, as we talked about last week, of raising the tensions between these two superpowers. We're both after ISIS, but we're at cross purposes with Assad. So there's this potential for disaster, and meanwhile, neither of us can do anything about ISIS, and it's resulting in things like civilians being killed. Because with all our technology, we can't just bomb the transport trucks that ISIS is using to carry the oil to their customer. We can't just bomb the line of Toyota trucks as they race around between these cities. I mean, do these trucks just stay in one city? How do they get anything done? I mean, don't these troops have to move? Are there caves throughout all of the Middle East that they're getting to Tunisia and Egypt by way of caves? And I mean, we know that through the HARP technology, we can even see down into the caves. I mean, it's impossible to think that we can't just bomb these guys' line of Toyota trucks, that they got to blow up civilian targets. So anyway, I hope people are, I'm sure that some of the people listening to us, and we're getting some more comments. There's a gentleman down in Australia that seems to know what's going on, and of course our good friend and fellow watcher Dave, brother Dave, seems to be the one that really gets it and is able to keep up with us. A lot of other comments, I see people still aren't really getting it, because they just want to reconcile it with the mainstream news that's their favorite, whoever it is. And I still promise you're not going to be able to. But if you will do the research, if you want to know whether I'm worth listening to, whether we're the channel to come and listen to at BroSal on YouTube or the Philadelphian Church, then all you got to do is go back to about the time of the Arab Spring and see what all your favorite correspondents were saying. And then compare that to what I was saying, and then go to that first flag of ISIS and see what your correspondents were saying and see what I've been saying, and then go to this growth of ISIS and see what your correspondents were saying and see what I've been saying. And Dad, I'm feeling more and more confident that what we're presenting is getting closer and closer to I should say the revealed facts, even through the propaganda that attempts to twist the facts into their narrative, keeps on proving what we've been saying. And I keep wanting to say that because, of course, the only way that anyone's going to benefit from our insight is if they hear it. And when 100 or 200 people a week are hearing it, well, that's slow going, isn't it? And so, there's a couple of us out there that keep sharing this and sending this to people as an alternative. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm saying prove me wrong. Give me your evidence. I'm giving you my evidence, and I'm telling you, put my evidence up against the New York Times, put my evidence up against the Washington Post, put my evidence up against CNN and Fox News and Business Insider and all these Associated Press mouthpieces, and you tell me who's got the accurate insight into all this. I'm feeling more confident every week that our insight is the accurate insight, and to the end of trying to understand the prophecy, which of course is where we're coming from with the Sunday gathering. We have a prophecy, as do the Muslims, of a great war that's coming, the greatest war, and it's supposedly going to be fought over near Damascus. And according to Albert Pike, or at least allegedly according to Albert Pike, it's going to be fought by the great atheist nation and the great Christian nation. And so, you start drawing these strings together. You start drawing the strings of a false deliverer of the Jews, and and the time that the real deliverer returned. Because remember, this all centers around this 7-year covenant that's made now by the false deliverer. And it's this that releases what Christians call the wrath of God, this final 7-year period recorded in Revelation. And that can only be for one thing. The Jews officially call someone else Messiah, and that is the straw. That is the thing that God cannot abide. It can't, as long as they don't do that, I suppose it could drag on forever, because they always have the opportunity to say, well, wait a minute, we've made a mistake. We found the evidence. Jesus is the Messiah. Holy moly, we didn't know that. But when they, the Talmud has already declared quite flatly that the Jews, did the right thing by destroying Jesus of Nazareth as a blasphemer. So officially, he's out. Jesus is not part of the discussion. However, not all the Jews agree with the official position of the state of Israel. Not that they claim Jesus, but they don't agree that the Zionist agenda is the Jewish agenda. And so it's the Zionists that are going to declare this Messiah as the official Messiah of the state of Israel, and that's what's going to bring the wrath of God, so-called, on the state of Israel. And that's what we know, Christians, as the end time, the tribulation, the great tribulation of the final 7 years. And so I've been trying to point out how all that thing seems to be falling into place now. And so anyway, I believe people can see where I'm getting at that with getting at. So anyway, Dad, thanks for having me on. It's always a pleasure to be part of the one channel that's been bringing truth, not tradition, to the world for many years, as you've been doing, and now almost 20, I think 19 years on the internet. And so for those that are listening, it really is we are not some new nutheads, conspiracy theorists with some sort of fresh theory to push. We're people who have been on a track of watching and relating it to Scripture and to historic events for 19 years on the internet. And so our track record is there to check, just like the New York Times and the Washington Post. And I encourage people to do that and to share it with others in that light. It's one thing to say, oh, these guys are, seem to be right or wrong. It's another to say, hey, look at the record. Look what he's been saying for months and months. And look what these other channels have been saying. So anyway, good luck out there, everybody. And I'll be happy to join you next week, Dad. Thanks. Talk to you soon.
Well, thank you very much, Tony. That was another wonderful explanation of the series of events that are going on in the Mideast and the world today that are leading us to the fulfillment of the Scriptures. And I thank you very much for the time and energy that you put into these shows. Folks, this ministry survives on what we call frankincense offerings, and I'll explain that to you. Frankincense is what was offered with, or had to be offered with, every offering at the tabernacle in the wilderness. And the Jews all knew from birth that frankincense represented hilarity and joy. And the Lord said, you give to the storehouse where you get your meat, and you do it with frankincense. A ministry like ours, which is a storehouse, because we don't charge for anything that goes on, but it allows you to participate in God's will by giving to the storehouse where you get your meat. So if you're getting your meat from this storehouse, then you make an offering, a frankincense offering, one that is made with hilarity and joy because you know what you're doing. You're doing it because the Lord asks you to do it. And we thank you for those offerings, because that's what keeps this ministry coming to you. And we do it the Lord's way. You do it because you know what you're doing, and you do it with hilarity and joy. Until we